In this video we are going to be looking at arrays and how we can explode values to create arrays. So the example that we're going to be looking at is from a database. Now I've given an example here that you can see on the screen. If you've not looked at databases too much, then don't worry about this. This is a basics video, so really we're just looking at how we can manipulate strings and convert them into arrays essentially. At this point. So, by exploding something, what do we mean? Well, it's a very vague function name, but essentially what it does is it breaks up a string by a delimiter. So, for example, a comma, a pipe, a space, anything like that. So, in this case, I have a database record here. One record, just a username. Or a single user on one row, and I've got some likes listed here that are comma separated, and we've also got a deliberate space in here just so we can see the behavior of this as well when we have anomalies such as spaces, things like that. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're not going to be connecting to the database and wasting time, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking how we can convert this into an array. And you're probably thinking, well, why do we need this into an array? And the answer is so we can manipulate it a lot better than we can as a string. So let's just say we were to connect to our database and retrieve a list of likes that the user has saved here. In the case of them saving some things, we would use implode to convert maybe a list of things that they entered, but it's most likely that they would enter a list, comma separated list, which is fine because then we can delimit by this, but we'll go into that in the tutorial on imploding. Okay, so we have this list here. The reason we're storing it comma separated, by the way, is so we don't have to have record after record after record which relate back to this user. It's a lot more efficient to store it in a long string which is comma separated. Anyway, over to our text editor. I'm going to give you an example of after this has been extracted from the database, how we can use explode on this to essentially convert it into an array, and how we can examine this array as well. Okay, so the database data that we retrieve will be the likes. So I'm just going to place this data into a string here, so we can assume that this line has done something a lot more than just specified this. It's pulled it from the database. Okay, so what we're going to be doing now is looking at the explode function itself. So explode looks like this. It's just explode, and the parameters that we need to give obviously go within the parentheses. That's obvious. And the parameters that we need to pass are the delimiter, which I explained a moment ago, and the string that we want to pass through. These are the typical options that we would give this. So we have 1, 2 parameters. The first one's a comma. We know that we want to break this up, so we want this to be the first record, this to be the second, this to be the third, and obviously this to be the fourth. So the comma will say, well, separate this string by the commas, and in here goes the string that we want to separate, which in this case is likes. So if we head over to our browser and we actually run this, obviously nothing happens, but we don't have any errors, so we can assume that we've done this correctly. Now we want to examine what's actually happened here. Now we can just go ahead and echo the result of this just to see the behavior. It won't give us the contents of the array, but it will tell us if what's been generated by this or what's been passed back from the explode function, and that is an array, which is what we expect. So obviously now we want to examine the contents of the array. So we can use printr for this. So we can print r likes. What we need to do is set this to basically we need to set the contents of this, or the return of this, to this variable here, and we're duplicating the name here, but that doesn't matter because we don't need this information anymore. It's useless. We've got it in array form, so essentially what we're doing is just overwriting the contents of this likes variable. So here you can see that we have the contents of the array now. At position 0, the first element is eating. Position 1, the second is drinking. Position 2, so on, the gym. And we've got the space here which hasn't affected any of this, which is brilliant. So what have we done here? Well, we've taken a string that's comma separated, we've exploded it, which obviously, has some kind of real world meaning, and we've placed each of these values into an element of this array that's been created by the explode function. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why is this useful? Why do we have these values now in an array? What can we do with them? Well, there's a variety of things that we can do. They can be used to process anything really, loop through and list them. We can use the for each construct to loop through the elements of an array. So for example, for each likes as like, you might even want to go ahead and add key in there, and this will basically be equal to 0 for the first loop, 1, 2, 3 if you were to need that for any reason, and you could say like at position, and obviously you wouldn't output like this, but you could say like at position key. So for every like it would say something eating at position 0, and then so on. And let's just go ahead and add a line break at the end there, and you can see here we've got eating at position 0, drinking at position 1, the gym at position 2, nothing at position 3. Whereas in real life you would be more inclined to do something like this, for example, and then something in there. So you'd have maybe a list of links, or I don't know, something like that. Maybe a comma after there, or maybe just a line break. So yeah, I'm not going to faff around with too many more examples, but essentially what we've done is we haven't retrieved this from the database, but we've looked at the possibility of this coming from a database. We've taken this and we've broken it up into keywords. Now another really useful thing that we can do with splitting is to split by spaces. So for example, if someone was searching in a text field for something, blue cars or something, and they were to add a space in between, so for example blue cars, which is the worst example I can think of, you could split by a space, and then you could process each keyword to see if that matched anything within a database, for example. Now that's a useful way, as I say, that's a useful way of using splitting. However, explode will only take into account the exact string that you pass, because it's essentially splitting a string by a string. So if, for example, I was to split a string by a single space, and then I was to do the same method here, let's just go ahead and, we'll just keep it as it is. You can see we have got blue cars underneath each other. What happens if there is more than one space though? What happens here? This is, something that you've got to think about. Well, the problem here is this. Now, what's happened? We've just added more space between here. The actual problem is when we go ahead and print our likes, is the fact that we now have this empty value here. The reason being is if it splits by a space, it splits this, there's a space, there's a space, so this here where my caret is at the moment is included, then this is the last value. So if I did 3 spaces, you can probably guess that this will be the first space, this will now be included within the second element, split again by a space, and this. So it gets quite annoying that you can't, do this in, a really easy way. Actually, I didn't realize that it would do this. It's actually taken and split by 2 and included 2 nothings, essentially. So we can overcome this by using regular expressions, and we can use preg split, so we can use a regular expression split, which we'll be covering after this as well, as sort of a solution to this. But essentially that's explode, how we use it. You should have a very good idea now of how we can use this, and some of the things it can be used for, and also the problems that you can face in circumstances like this where you're splitting by spaces, and there could be a lot of spaces between certain characters, and then your results end up wrong like this, not as you would expect. So that's explode in PHP.